Hi everyone, my name is Jyotsna. I am the program officer with Safe City, and today we have with us Shefali from Teach for India. Hi Shefali, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Could you please tell us something about yourself?
Okay, so hi, my name is Shefali, and this is my fourth year with Teach for India. I'm an engineer by my degree, and I worked for 2 years in a corporate. And post that, I joined Teach for India as a fellow. I taught grade 3 and 4 in Pune for 2 years, the most amazing years of my career. And post that, I joined Teach for India on staff. Currently, I head the development and alumni relations in Delhi. By development, it means fundraising.
Right.
So yeah, I've been in this role for now about 18 months. That's about me.
That's great. Could you tell us something about Teach for India?
Sure. So Teach for India as an organization started in 2009. It was started by Shaheen Mistry. We started in Bombay and Pune. Our core program is the fellowship program, which is basically we hire young graduates as well as corporate professionals for a 2-year program, which we call the fellowship. During these 2 years, they're placed in a low-income private school or a government school where they're supposed to teach for 2 years, and we believe teaching as leadership module. So we believe that during these 2 years, when the fellows go through the exact real system of what our education entails, it's going to give them a better understanding of what our education crisis is all about.
Right.
So that's our 2-year fellowship program. And beyond that, our fellows become our alumni, just like any other program. And in the past, we've seen that 60% of our fellows have stayed back in the education space post this experience of Teach for India and have continued to do various things as alumni within the education space. To talk more about why Teach for India was started in the first place, so the problem that we're working on is education crisis. There are two things to education crisis. One is the number of children who actually end up going to school, and we know that 96% enrollment rate. Okay, so beyond the 96% who actually make it to school, about half of them drop out by grade 5. And the ones who continue from grade 5, about 3/4 of them drop out by grade 10. So basically, it's a very, very small population, the lucky few who actually make it to college.
Right.
But what at Teach for India we're looking at is not just what is the quality of learning that our kids are getting in the school, and if we see right now all the results of the outcomes that are there, most of the children in whatever grade they are, they're way behind their grade level. So a grade 5 student cannot read a grade 2 text, they can do basic addition, subtraction and stuff like this. So this is like quite a grave issue. We're missing out on a major potential of our children, not just by missing them on entering the school education, but like what is it that they're getting in their school education. So at Teach for India, we believe that all children deserve an excellent education irrespective of from where they're coming, what background they're coming from. And through this 2-year program, we try and expose young graduates who otherwise would not even know about this crisis or may not even face it in their current lives, to actually see it and take that initiative of what is possible with these children. So a lot of our focus is on just like how teaching can become teaching is it's a journey of a leader, because you're responsible for taking your children on a different life path. You're responsible for giving them all those things that are required for them to become awesome and like be job ready and be better human beings. So that's basically what our program focuses on.
I think what you guys are doing is really great, because like we all know, right to education is the most fundamental and primary right which every child should be entitled to. So like you mentioned, one highlight of Teach for India is the 2-year fellowship program. So do you have a structured module around it as to what will you cover during those 2 years?
Yeah, definitely. So most of the kind of people we recruit as fellows come from very diverse backgrounds. I myself, as I said, I'm an engineer with people from psychology background, from commerce background, from law, and most of them may not have taught before or don't understand what teaching is. Given it's a very high rigor program, so they go through a 5-week residential training in Pune before they become fellows. And this is a training program where they get both practical training as well as theoretical training on what are the teaching practices, how do you develop a culture in the classroom, what are your personal strengths and how do you leverage them in the classroom. Post these 5 weeks, they're placed in a school, which is generally a low-income private school or a government school. And while they're in their schools, they're definitely going to cover the curriculum of the school, but we believe education is literally 3-pronged. It's academics, values and mindsets, and exposure and access. So only when you give a child all of these, exposure to everything, which is content, very strong values, which make them better human beings, as well as exposure and access to the opportunities out there, is when a child is like totally like 100% groomed, and probably can take those decisions in his life. So through these 2 years, the fellows are given a lot of ongoing support in terms of what subjects they're teaching and how do they teach. There's a program manager who sort of gives them continuous feedback on their classroom, this thing, and gives them training, one-on-one support in terms of what's required in the classroom. So if let's say I'm a fellow who joined grade 3, I'll continue with the same children in grade 4 as well. So I basically spend 2 years with the same children, which helps me build a very strong connect with them and also understand them really in and out in terms of what their level is.
Absolutely.
We take a baseline assessment as soon as a fellow is going inside the classroom. We do a baseline assessment of maths and literacy, through which they understand where each of their child is in academics. And then through the coverage of the content and the kind of teaching practices that we work on, we do a mid-year assessment to see where the growth has been, and then we do an end-of-year assessment. So basically, during the fellows' tenure in these 2 years, they do 6 tests with the children to know from where they started and then where they ended up being. So that's how we track our own progress, and along with that, of course, there are school exams that take place, which a child is supposed to give, and that also gives us an understanding of like how we're doing as fellows in the classroom.
Like you mentioned, you actually conduct an assessment post the entire fellowship. So how far do you think the impact has reached, or what all do you need to cover?
Yeah. So in terms of impact, as I said, like sometimes kids are 3 or 4 years behind their grade level. We've seen on an average, depending on like context of the classroom, we've seen impact like the coverage being from 1 year to 4 years. So let's say there's a grade 5 child or a grade 5 classroom, there would be certain children who would have only moved by 1 year because of a lot of issues, be it their own grasping power or be it their community. And there's some kids who really like pick very quickly, so they've probably just covered an entire 4-year gap. On an average, we've seen, and at least that's the goal that we set for our fellows, is like covering on an average 2 years of grade level gap. So for example, I taught grade 3 and 4, so when I left grade 4, my kids were actually on a negative, like they were at a pre-nursery level, but when I left, they had covered 2 years of gap on an average. So in English, and in maths, my class mastery was 55%. So again, they started at 0%, literally like 0 to 4%. But then when I moved out, my kids were now scoring a 55% on their maths. That's my classroom. But overall, we've seen like on an average in teacher-in classrooms, we've been able to cover 2 years of great difference.
Wow, I think that's great. And like you mentioned, it's been 4 years that you're working with Teach for India now, and earlier you were a fellow and now you're working with them. So how has the experience been, and how these two experiences are different and yet so related to each other?
Yeah, so being a fellow, I think, was the most challenging, 2 years of my life in terms of, I think you feel just very, very overwhelmed and challenged, and extremely excited about, being in a classroom as a teacher. So there are failures and successes every day.
Right.
Every day, when a child, ends up speaking a new word in vocabulary, or just cracks another topic in maths, it just seems great. And every time a child misses school or breaks down or feels like that he's not doing enough, you as a teacher like question yourself. So I think for those 2 years it was a mix of both mental and physical exhaustion, at the same time a lot of very, very overwhelming moments in terms of just seeing my children grow every day. What these 2 years also did was, I think I was never pushed enough on my sense of possibility and what's really possible with these children. But these 2 years really made me see like, with the right kind of support and the right kind of guidance, and if you really believe in the children, they really can do things which are beyond in anybody's imagination.
Right.
So I learned a lot of skills like just being able to plan very meticulously to deliver a lesson, to be able to organize my time so that I'm able to cover majority of the things, to be able to set a vision which is ambitious and also something which is achievable in 2 years. So just knowing what is possible for my children, being able to develop relationships with some of the most difficult stakeholders in the community, be it your co-teachers who always might not see you as somebody, they might just see you in the beginning as a threat to their own jobs, which you are not there. So how do you build that trust with them where it becomes a learning experience for both the parties? How do you work with parents who are not used to teachers, who are coming and engaging with children at that level. So we used to do a lot of community visits as well. So for parents, it was a little surprise, like why are teachers coming to home and what's really happening. So I think it was a lot of like pushing myself on getting out of my comfort zone and working with these various stakeholders in the school, setting a very ambitious vision for my children and my school. There were 3 more school team members that I worked with, and then the 4 of us did a lot of things like science exhibitions, art exhibitions in our school. We took our children for a lot of exposure and access visits to like museums, science parks. Beyond that, we also invited a lot of external people to our school to like do lectures, be it like doctors or choreographers and other people. So I think we just try to figure out like what's really possible with these children by bringing all of these things together. And post those 2 years, a new fellow came into my classroom, and this new fellow has taken my classroom to another level, because when I joined, my kids couldn't understand why, how, what, like very basic English. In these 2 years, they built that vocabulary, they became articulate, their confidence developed. So when the new fellow came in, she had a very strong base to start with. So now she's taken the class to another level, and the kids are doing really well. What happened in these 2 years is that I decided that this is something I really, really enjoy doing. However, teaching is one of the most incredibly paying jobs in terms of satisfaction, but also extremely demanding and challenging. I think in my life, I would not do anything which can match up to the kind of challenge that I faced as a teacher, but also in terms of satisfaction, nothing will match up to that. Suppose these 2 years, I realized that I want to continue to work with this organization, Teach for India, because I really believed in what they're doing, and then hence I took up this role. I've realized that one of my strengths is also just relationships and networking, and the kind of role that I am right now lets me do that and work towards like many more children in the city. So we work with 10,000 kids in Delhi, and it's just helping me bring in a lot many stakeholders to join hands with us. In terms of difference, not really much. I think I was working on ground. That right now I'm impacting these children indirectly. But what I'm in touch with is just all these inspiring stories and all these success stories that I keep hearing from our fellows, from our children, and that's what gives me like a lot of joy in what I do. So yeah,
I think that's great, because you guys are actually moving beyond the defined spectrum of education and actually taking it to different aspects of it. Like you mentioned, you also call doctors and anything which is also different in a way, but yet allows you to educate your own self in certain aspects of it. And I think also when you say that earlier you were a fellow and now you're working with it, I'm sure that your learnings as a fellow is impacting what you're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So I also wanted to know for my own self that were there any specific challenges, not just with the children but also with the communities, and then also with the teachers, the school faculty, or the system of the school itself?
Yeah, definitely. So I think to begin with, one of the things that we keep talking about at different is just the crisis of leadership. I think from your school principal to the teachers, like how do you drive that passion for what they're doing, and how do you make them feel good about their jobs? Because monetarily, it's not something which pays really well, especially in the low-income private schools. The salaries are really low there. Also, the skills of these teachers, because most of them probably, they've done their degrees like B.Ed. Some of them are doing really well. They've really grown through these degrees, but some of them are really struggling, and the ongoing support is really, really minimal. So I think one of the biggest gaps that I see is just the skill gap, and the gap of like just motivation and just enjoying and loving what you do every day. So some of them have been doing it for years now, and when they don't see the impact, they become very, very complacent about it. So that's one. How do you motivate the teachers? How do you incentivize their work? How do you really like make them feel boosted about what they're doing? The second is, I think, the school is not very away from the community, so you really can't work in the school without working or figuring out the community. So if the community is a place where there's a lot of violence, or like abusive language, or the space is not safe enough for children, it becomes very difficult to like build that within the school. The third is just, I think, parent engagement. So I feel what I saw was very surprising actually. I thought parents were extremely excited about sending their children to school. Because especially I was in a low-income private school. So in my school, like the kids were paying the fees to come to the school. So the parents felt very responsible about it. But they struggled in supporting their children back home, right? So if it's an English medium education that we're working on, like the parents really struggle with like which textbook needs to be referred to and what needs to be done next. So I think just making parents feel confident and giving them some techniques at home that even if you can't teach them, how do you still sit with them and make sure that they are doing their work and stuff like this. So I think parent engagement, teacher investment. I also feel infrastructure is a big problem in these schools. It's not the biggest problem because I feel if the teacher is very good, then these issues can be tackled. But I think the major problem is, let's say, the toilets are not very clean. Kids really like struggle and they fall sick so often. The schools do not have things like computers or library the way we had it in our schools. These extra things don't really work out. Sports equipment is not there. There's no basketball court. There's no like all of those things. I think these, like, I would put it as the last of it because I feel like the rest of the things can be worked out. The kids can really figure these things out. But infrastructure definitely is an issue in these schools. So yeah.
And do you think safety also plays an impact?
Very big role, I think, and safety is the most unsaid issue. Like all of these other things that I'm talking about are so visible, and you can like literally, it's palpable. You can see that they exist. But if a child is facing any sort of violence at home, or if there's any sort of sexual abuse, or like it's just such a hush thing. Like kids don't talk about it. I also feel like as a fellow, I felt very uncomfortable, very ill-equipped to deal with something so sensitive. Over these 3 years, 4 things so sensitive. Like struggle as well as being able to figure out what needs to be done with the children when these issues come up. But this is still one of the most difficult, sensitive, and something which really needs a very strong intervention at the right point, both in terms of just awareness, like how do you make people aware of what is the problem, what can be done about it, and also just like interventions at the right point of time.
So one last thing I would like to ask you is that now you have your set of learnings and your set of challenges. So what do you think, how we can actually make education safer for all? Taking your learnings with you and your challenges with you, what do you think we can do further ahead to make it inclusive, safe and accessible to all?
Yeah, I think one thing is, to begin with, I think it's everybody's business. I think to begin with, I think just everybody needs to take the ownership of either their own children or their neighborhood children or the communities around them, on just like how important education is and what is the significance of quality education in the first place. And then once people are aware and they start like looking at it, I think just having a lot of awareness of the issues which exist when we talk about education, right? Education is not about textbooks. It's not about just learning from the books. It's about creating a society or an environment which is like better and safe for all. So I would say to begin with, it needs to be awareness and then the right kind of interventions. The teachers being more equipped to handle such sensitive issues. The students feeling much more confident to come up and speak. The laws being put across in a way that people are able to approach and ask for justice whenever there isn't any. I think creating policy is one step, and then execution and implementation is like another thing, right? So like RTE came in, and if you see there's so many breakdowns on the implementation level, and how do we sort of cope up with that? So I think our policies are very strong overall. I mean, there's a really good job done in terms of just the framework that we have for education, the kind of things that we want to teach our children. The NCERT textbooks are amazing, but I think the breakdown starts happening at the level of execution, and I think we can make excellent education and a safer education for all possible if we start like mitigating these implementation challenges and really make those policies convert into reality. So that's what I feel. I think just